down, power lines are down.
Message of 290 characters follows.
Hey guys, dealing with some spring allergies here. I wanted to bring you a few podcasts that I recorded back in early 2025, late 2024 about Hurricane Helene and some other things surrounding that. So this is some older stuff that I didn't put on my YouTube channel, recorded it for another platform, but I wanted to share here. So that's why you're hearing some things about older events. I hope you guys enjoy. There's a lot of great and useful information here, just in folks' experiences. So hope you guys enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prepping Academy podcast. This is Patrick in for Forrest today, as we will be discussing the impact of Hurricane Helene and some prepping lessons learned from that. This will likely be a multi-part series covering the events at Prepper Camp, some of the relief efforts afterward, and lessons learned. Normally, you would find me discussing communications, and there will be plenty of communications things to discuss related to the hurricane, but this will be a sort of after-action report covering the experience of Forrest, Beth, and Pistol Pete at Prepper Camp. I'm blessed to have the three of them on here with us. They are wonderful part of PrepperNet. I want to take this time to encourage everyone to remember the people in Eastern Tennessee and Western North Carolina that are still recovering from the impact of the hurricane. It is not over yet. They are still and will be for many months and years working to restore Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee. So if you can do anything to help those folks as winter is approaching, I would encourage you to do so. Don't forget about them, because the news cycle has moved on to more interesting things. That being said, I want to welcome Forrest, Pete, and Beth as we talk about the events of Prepper Camp. Initially, it was expected that the hurricane would come west of the Appalachian Mountains towards my location in Eastern Tennessee, and that we would likely see the most severe impact of the hurricane. However, at the last minute, the hurricane seemed to change path and go around the eastern side of the mountains, directly crossing over Prepper Camp. And while no one would have went if they had known just how bad that it was going to be, no one expected this sort of impact. I would now like to welcome my friends from PrepperNet to tell their story and their experience at Prepper Camp. Tell us a little bit about your thought process and kind of how you ended up there and stayed and all the things that went on there, because you guys literally went through the eye of the storm, I think.
I mean, I can speak to my thought process of why I went, knowing the hurricane was coming. It's just another weather event that we hear so much about, and it's up in the mountains, and who would have thought that it was going to amount to anything? So, we went up. I did not stay in Tent City where I normally stay. I was in a camper shared a camper with a friend of mine, and she and I were along a tree line, which was, in hindsight, a really dangerous place to be. But we went because we never thought anything would actually happen.
I'd agree with that. When I left, the hurricane was supposed to be, or what was left of the hurricane was supposed to be headed west of Knoxville, and we did hear that it was maybe moving east a little, but we didn't realize it was going to go. I would not have gone to Prepper Camp if I'd have known the eye was going right over Saluda, North Carolina. I mean, I'm all up for an adventure, but not that much adventure. It was lucky that nobody at the campground was hurt, or it was like we had a bubble of protection over us. Compared to the surrounding community, we were really well off.
So Forrest, not so much, though.
Usually a hurricane hits any part of the coast of the United States, the mountains are so isolated, so far away, and they usually just get a little bit of rain. The only time that wasn't the case was when probably 30 years ago when Hurricane Hugo came through, which was a huge one. It came through Charlotte, went up the mountains, a lot of damage. But when you talk about hurricane, people in the mountains, even in Charlotte, we really don't prepare for it because it really never affects us. So when there was a hurricane hitting Florida, we didn't think anything of it. Usually it would be downgraded to a tropical storm by the time it would hit Georgia. And then in the mountains, we would get a little rain and a little wind. And that's how it is 100 years in a row until, this one came. So it was a once in 100 years event.
So a lot of folks don't really know the timeline of what happened. It was in some ways a couple of days from somebody who was kind of sitting on the perimeter of this before we really knew what happened in some of the worst hit places. Because first we started hearing about things on the fringes. We heard about Asheville, and we heard about some of the things over in Swannanoa where it was hit really, really bad. And over on my side of the mountains in Irwin, we were seeing the flooding, and we were seeing videos of people being rescued by helicopters, and we were seeing the Pigeon River wash I-40 out and flood downtown Newport and those sorts of things. But we really didn't know what was going on upstream. You guys were kind of in the dark completely because cell phones went down. I know when I tried to text a couple of you that morning, I never got a response. And when I tried to call, it went straight to voicemail until Beth sent me a note via her Garmin and Reach, satellite communications for the win on this one. So what was it like for you guys in that first, I guess the rivers kind of peaked sometime late morning. What was it like in those hours from when the storm hit in the middle of the night until things kind of got the worst on into the morning, when people really started figuring out what was going on? Did you guys have any idea what was going on outside of the camp you were in? Did you think you were in the worst of it? Did you what were you guys thinking on that front?
Okay, well, again, so I was not in Tent City in a tent. So they had a very different experience from me. We had the high winds and everything, and I still was clueless that so much was happening around us, and just protected, a hedge of protection that we didn't get hit by a tree. But in the morning, immediately we started listening to the repeater and on Mount Mitchell and finding out a lot more things were happening. And one of the other campers had actually a TV, like just in a briefcase, this old-fashioned TV with an antenna outside. And we got 3 local stations. And we were watching and just not believing that what had transpired that night and that morning. I knew my family would be really worried. I sent out those Garmin inReach texts to my family, and they responded back and forth. So that was a huge relief that nobody was sitting there worried what happened to me in Saluda. But I think both Forrest and Pete had a very different experience of that night and that morning.
That night was, I didn't get any sleep in the tent. I had a tent set up, and it was backed up against the woods, and it was facing a little path that went up through Tent City. And I had stretched out, my wife had bought this really ridiculously large tarp. And so I brought that, and I stretched it out over the tent from the trees. I had it tied off to the trees, over the tent and over my canopy to the back of my truck. It was pretty well protected, but the wind and the rain was so bad. It was just like somebody beating on a garbage can lid all night long. And you're in a tent, you hear everything. I could hear water running around me. And, like there's a little stream or something running beside the tent, which there was several of them, I think. And the wind was insane. And I want to say about sometime between 3:30 and 4 o'clock in the morning, it started sounding a lot like the Wizard of Oz out there. And I decided it'd be a really good idea to get out of the tent and get in the truck just to be on the safe side, because I felt like trees might start taking flight. When I got out, my tent was still standing. My canopy was still up. I think I had sent Patrick a text or something, and it was right before the cells went down. I actually had meant to send it over to the other side of the campground, let them know we were still alive in Tent City, but I sent it to you, and I said, I'm not a morning person. I had no sleep. I sent that, And immediately after that, I guess the cell tower started dropping out, no internet service or anything like that. I guess when it started to get light outside is when I started my truck, and it was still all sideways rain and everything. And I heard Beth on the radio asking if we were okay in Tent City. I said, yeah. I said, I could see some canopies down. She said, is your stuff still up? I said, yeah, I think so. And I turned around and looked, and my canopy had collapsed. It was brand new. I just opened it up. So I sat in the truck. I ran the truck for a while. The radio was in the truck, and I thought, let me see if I can pick up anything with my mobile radio in the truck. I tuned around, and I heard a repeater, and I knew it wasn't the repeater. It's not the repeater I had programmed in. I had programmed a repeater in Goldsboro for that channel, and it was the same frequency as another repeater in Western North Carolina. I just didn't have the input tone for it. I was pretty shocked at some of the stuff I was hearing on that repeater. A tree had fallen on somebody in their truck and broken their back. They were trying to get him medical attention. I know a lot of folks probably saw the video I posted on YouTube where the audio from that is on there, where they're trying to get him help. That guy actually reached out to me on YouTube and let me know that he was the guy that the tree fell on. He's still alive. It did break his back, and they have had to fuse his back together, but he's just grateful to be alive. It was an amazing thing to hear that on the radio. And that repeater eventually did go down, I think, because it was on emergency power. And that's when I switched over later on to the Mount Mitchell repeater, which never stopped. I mean, that thing was just amazing, amazing. Everybody in Tent City seemed like they had some kind of damage or destruction to their canopies, although the tents somehow seemed to stay up, although a few of them may have gotten flooded out a little bit. And it was a very tiring night, and it was I felt like I was kind of exhausted during the day. And of course, it's that Friday. Some people are still trying to come in there. Most of them are getting turned around. I don't know how, but a couple of people did show up. They stayed there. We had a couple, I think one person left early and everybody else stayed. We all kind of banded together and helped each other out. If somebody needed a radio programmed and somebody would have a cable they didn't have, or somebody needed a battery charge, all that stuff, we all sort of helped each other out. It was a situation where, because we didn't have as much damage at that campground, it was hard to believe. It was hard to let everything sink in as how bad the damage was everywhere in Western North Carolina. It was just amazing.
That is such a crazy story about all the things that were going on surrounding everybody, and just all the different pieces and parts, and frankly, how lucky you guys really were, considering all the other damage around. And I know Forrest wasn't quite so lucky. He made it out unscathed, but had a little bit of a scary incident I heard about. So, Forrest, what happened at your place?
I was 6 miles south of Saluda in a town called Tryon, and I was staying in a Airbnb. I know everyone's going to laugh at me, but when I go to camps like Prepper Camp, I teach a couple classes, and then I talk all day, and I meet people, and people have questions, and I get so just tired. I've decided when I do that not to camp in a tent anymore. It's just my preference. So I was staying in that nice Airbnb 6 miles away, and I had television, and I was watching and keeping up, and around 5 a.m, heard some things in the woods going on, and the wind was just blowing. And around 6:45, I was laying in bed, and I heard this massive tree just break. And you can tell when a tree's close, and you don't know how close until it hits the ground. It hits the house you're in, then it hits the ground, and I don't know, but your butt puckers a little bit. And you're like, what was that? And I leaned up and looked out the window behind my headboard, and there was a tree about, I don't know, 2.5, 3 foot in diameter, literally leaning against the building that I was in. That tree was probably, if I said it's 5 feet, I'm exaggerating. It was further, it was less than that. It was probably 4 feet if I measured it with a tape measure. That thing hit the side of the building. It knocked the building, this tiny house, off its frame, off the what do you call it?
The foundation.
And just by like 2 inches, and you could tell inside, and then photos and things were falling off the walls, and it fell. And I looked out and saw that tree. And at that time, it's 6:45. It's pretty light out. You can see what's going on. And I'm like, what in the world? So I got my shoes on. I walked outside, and that's when my heart just went, oh my gosh, that thing literally 4 feet over, it would have crushed me. I mean, there would have been nothing left of me except my shoes hanging out the end. And that was it. And so then I went up. It was a 2-story tiny house. So I went up the stairs to the road, and there's a lady. She kind of is the caretaker of the property, and she was shaking like you would not believe, because apparently her bed was right above mine and the next floor. And we're standing there, and I have no idea. I've never met this lady, never talked to her, and she's literally just got her arms around me, just shaking. And we're there, and I'm calming her down. I mean, I'm terrified at this point, and I'm calming her down. And it's just raining, the wind's blowing. And so we stand there for probably 15 minutes. And then all of a sudden we hear another tree, and we're like, what? And we look, and we both see a tree across the road coming right towards us. Now, it wasn't like it was a dead tree. So we had to move like 15 feet, and it fell exactly where we were standing. And all of a sudden, this lady goes into panic mode again. And I'm like, I don't know your name, but we're okay. We made it through. We'll be fine. And but the neighborhood I was in, it took them, and I was joking with them. I'm like, hey guys, I'm just, I'm staying in the Airbnb. I probably need to get out of here. Could y'all get this cut? Because we're all meeting in the street at this time around 10 o'clock. I'm like, yeah, y'all need to hurry up. I got places to go. There's trees like everywhere. And there was like, I think they said there were 8 or 9 trees for anyone just to get out of the neighborhood. They were just down. And we didn't have any mudslides where I was, but it was somewhat terrifying. But I don't want to sound cheesy, but I think I have higher callings in my life, and it's not my time to go yet. So I was spared, thank goodness. But it was terrifying how close that tree came. And I have photos, and I've showed you guys the photos, and you're like, okay, yeah, if that's crazy close. But it was, power went out. I had TV, through my and then the internet went out, and I had no communications whatsoever at this point, except my ham radio, and I couldn't connect to anything. I didn't even dream about hitting the Mount Mitchell retreat. I just don't know why. It didn't even come to my mind about hitting the Mount Mitchell repeater, but I had my radio, and I'm like, what am I going to do? What? And so I just literally because as soon as it came, it left. I know that sounds weird, but the wind where I was started around big time around 3, and by like 8 in the morning, it was gone. Sun's out, coming out, and it was gone. And all the damage was done during that period of time.
So by 8 o'clock, which was before a lot of the flooding peaked in areas north of there, it was over. Sun was back out where you guys were, and it was more or less back to normal, which is just incredible as to how quickly that this happened and then moved out. But the after effects of it lingered on for quite some time. And, Forrest's story goes along with the countless stories, everything I've seen from being in there, other people have seen. Trees everywhere. If you were going anywhere, you needed a chainsaw. It was just the nature of it. And that kind of goes on to, one of my questions about what was the atmosphere like on Friday morning. I know you guys had some people out trying to clear roads. I know you decided to stay for a while, probably because you couldn't get out. So, just real quick, kind of what was it like on Friday as people were picking up the pieces and trying to decide, okay, are we going to stop this? Are we going to keep going? What was the kind of sentiment in the crowd there?
So I know that morning it was reported people weren't coming in or coming out, right? There was nobody, couldn't get down the road. So there were a lot of the preppers there that had chainsaws that just went out and started clearing that road between Lake Orchard Campground all the way down to Saluda. I think it took them a few hours to clear that bubble at the campground itself. And that decision was made to continue on with the day. I will, I don't know whether to interject this now or not, but I realize I'm known for keeping a lot of stuff in the trunk of my car as a prepper.
Okay, time out.
And,
You cannot fit a Coca-Cola can in the trunk of your car because it's always full.
Okay, right. And so now I realize I'm going to have to get a bigger car, maybe a truck, because I got to start carrying a chainsaw and some fuel.
18-wheeler?
In my car.
Next thing you know, she's going to be bringing a skid steer with her and a grapple. Of course, that might have been wise for this one.
Yeah, I don't know if y'all have other thoughts about what that Friday, the rest of Friday was like, but other than once that road was cleared, I felt like we were somewhat in a bubble still.
I think Forrest just went home at that point, but
yeah, once I got out, I tried to get over to Saluda and couldn't. I was going down Highway 26, I-26, a major interstate up towards Asheville, and I'm going over a hill, and as I go over the hill, I notice there's headlights on my side of the interstate, and I'm like, wait, what's going on here? Why is that car coming this way? What's going on? And then all of a sudden I saw another car, and another car. And it took me, because you think I would be smarter than this. Okay, after like 10 cars, no, I'm like at 50 at this point going, oh, they're turning around down there because there's something going on. So on the interstate, I literally stopped in the middle of the interstate, turned around and got in line, and we're all kind of going up the emergency lane back the other way as cars are just flying down, and they start seeing, they were slow like me to react, trying to figure out what's going on. And I was a little slow at that point because I've just never seen cars come towards me like a line of cars and trucks. And I didn't even dream that the interstate would be blocked or flooded. And it was flooded down there. Literally, it was flooded less than a half mile from the Saluda exit. But in hindsight, I mean, even if I had got to the exit, there was no way I could get to the campground. It was totally shut in at that point.
That's right. They did have trees down on the roads going to and from the campground. It was still raining when Steve from the Atlanta City group came up to me and told me that he had stayed in his truck that night. He had left his ignition on, so his battery was dead. One of the other campers tried to use a jump pack, but that didn't work, so I drove down there. I didn't even get out of my car. I just popped the hood and let him look it up because it was sideways rain, and I was wearing my duster that was already like 30 pounds heavy with rain. Steve, to his credit, he didn't bring a chainsaw, but he went out and found one. He borrowed a chainsaw and went out and started cutting stuff up. I don't know where he was cutting stuff, but he was cutting stuff up. And I think there was one or two other crews of people from around there that were out on the road just trying to get one lane open so that people could get through if they had to. You know, everybody checked on each other around Tent City, and almost everybody got some kind of water, even if it was minor. Charles and Ashley had a small little pond in their tent. It was They gave me a list of things that they did right and did wrong, sort of an after action report on their campsite. And one of the things that they said they did right was bringing a cot. They also had two different power sources. They had a solar panel and one of those little mini inverter generators, the little 1,000-watt ones. All in all, we weren't in that bad a shape. The cool thing about that day, I think, was I set my radios up, and of course, I made an HF contact with the little Xiegu G90. You got my traffic from Comstat, I think it was, on JSA. The cool thing about it was, first off, I found something that was not set up correctly, and that was my VRM. Fixed that as soon as I got home. The other thing was, I was impressed that I was able to make it out of there with a QRP radio and a crappy antenna. That was pretty impressive. I was impressed with the satellite technology that was there. Beth's inReach was pretty cool, and I think 3 different people out there had Starlink at the campground. We had better communications than the county we were in and the surrounding counties. When it really, for a regional grid down disaster, I really saw the value of all that technology, and I include the HF and the 2-meter stuff that was going on, because it never stopped. It just kept going and going. I think Charles and Ashley camping over for me, I really kind of browbeat them into studying for a technician exam. And since we gave the test out there, Ashley became a new technician class ham operator. So I was really happy that we had some sort of silver lining throughout this thing. I think there was a lot of silver linings, but I was real happy that somebody I knew got their ham ticket while we were there. And we tried to be as normal as we could, and we all kind of helped each other out. If somebody needed a charging cable for the radio or something like that, we all tried to help each other out. But we were kind of isolated in there, and nobody. I was amazed that a few folks actually did make it in on Friday, but they couldn't stop and fill up with gas when they got into town because the line was ridiculously long at the gas station, the one that was running because they had a generator. It became an issue later on when we left, but fortunately it wasn't a major one.
The next question I want to ask you guys about is, what useful tools, information sources, gear, that kind of stuff that you keep with you in your get home bag, your bug out bag, your camping gear, were like the most important critical things that you maybe didn't think were, or just realized I couldn't live without that. We've already hit on a couple of important things that keep showing up in this situation. Starlink, satellite communicators, those were all over the place and everywhere throughout this emergency, and really proved their worth in getting information and that kind of thing in and out. I know even in a lot of areas, Western North Carolina, the Viper, the state radio system, was offline. They were having to bring in portable sites. We had that problem in Tennessee with the TACAN system as well. And you guys, with HF radio, being on Mount Mitchell, having Starlink, being able to monitor over-the-air TV even, and having power to run all of that stuff, put you probably almost on the scale of some counties' emergency operations centers. You guys were very squared away on that front compared to a lot of people that really had no clue what was going on. If you guys have, obviously chainsaws, everybody needed a chainsaw. You were looking for chainsaws. What other tools, gear, supplies, stuff did you guys find super useful? I know at one point y'all were just sitting around, watching YouTube on Starlink and eating steaks while the rest of the world burned. But, hey, that's what prepping is about. It's about, maintaining a sense of normalcy when everything else is not normal, because you're ready. I'm just going to start at the bottom of the list again with Beth. Any thoughts on that stuff while Pete stops laughing?
Yeah. So I am always in the habit of, if my car, anytime I get somewhere or arrive somewhere, I immediately fill up my gas tank. And anytime my tank is on half empty, to me, that means empty. I fill it up. But after this, I realized, and I did not have a problem with fuel getting home, but I could have. And one of the people traveling in my party, we were caravanning, she was desperate for gas. So I think something else that I would probably consider when I get that bigger car is carrying some fuel, 5 gallons, of fuel with me. I think that would be beneficial. I think we're pretty squared away with everything else, like you said, which is preparedness and being able to get through incidents with normalcy. At some point, I'd like to touch on misinformation, and I can share some things with that there at Prepper Camp and some of my post relief efforts.
Yeah,
I'll swing back around to that maybe.
Yeah, if you want to actually, just on the side of Prepper Camp, because there's a lot of stuff after things develop into the relief side we can talk about on that front. But for as far as just Prepper Camp went, what kind of bad information, misinformation, misappropriated information was running around there?
So, I mean, I really only have 2 minor incidents, but the thing about those is it made me really start thinking, how do you trust what you're hearing? And it's not on purpose necessarily, it's people's perspective. So there was a lady camping a few spots up from us, and she was talking to another PrepperNet member saying, "Don't come, the whole campground's flooded, it's over the top of my boots. You can't even walk through the campground." Well, I was standing near her. The rain wasn't over the top of her boots, but that was her perspective. That was the information she was giving out. And you can see how it's hard to know what you're hearing is true or not. Another incident was one of our PrepperNet people's perception was that Prepper Camp was very well attended. Well, I looked and I thought it was not well attended. There was hardly anybody there. Nobody could even get there. These there were some more, but these 2 little minor incidents just show you how misinformation gets out there, right? And then how do you know what you're hearing's accurate or not?
Absolutely. And, with those things from somebody on the outside, out of the mouths of 2 or 3, let it be true. You want to find several independent sources for that kind of information that all match up, because one person's perspective may be different. So, Pete, what were your thoughts on all that stuff? Did you bring enough fuel? Did you have enough zebra cakes? Did you have, all the stuff you needed?
So whenever I travel, and just for the record, I wasn't driving an economy car. I drive a gas guzzler. I have a Toyota Tundra. It gets 15 miles a gallon. As soon as I got into town, I filled it up. And I got there on Thursday so people have a frame of reference for when I got there. There was one guy filling up a bunch of extra tanks. He was preparing for bad weather. And I thought, well, okay, he's one of my people, but it's probably not going to do anything by the time it gets here. And I'm sure he was really glad he filled those things up. He probably did need them. The range of my truck, if I have a full tank of gas and I take my normal route, I can go from Saluda, North Carolina to Wake County. It's not a problem. We didn't take that route back, but I was still able to make it all the way, to the gas station by my house before I had to fill up. And it was not good to try to get gas if you were within, I don't know, 60 or 70 miles at least of that impact area, because there were so many lines for the gas stations that were open. I don't want to move to the end of the line of the event there, but that was just one of the things, that habit of filling up the vehicle every time I go somewhere, I think really paid off. One of the things that might have been more helpful is I thought I brought a larger capacity battery, because once mine ran dead, I didn't feel like recharging it. I was already hearing so much stuff on 2 meters. I didn't want to keep monitoring HF with that QRP radio with the crappy antenna that kept falling over. At least when the wind stopped it, it wasn't so bad. But yeah, it was neat. I think I was still able to hit 6 stations. I know I got you in Tennessee. I think I got another 1 or 2 stations in Tennessee. I hit 1 or 2 in North Carolina, and I think I hit another one that was either Georgia or Alabama. Not a really good turnout for what I'm used to, but under the circumstances, I'm not going to complain. As long as I could hit one person, I'd been happy. The thing was, I couldn't contact my family at first to let them know that I was, in fact, okay. So I sent messages 3 different ways, and it was good to be able to let everybody in the family know that I was okay, and that I was just going to come back Sunday like I'd planned, because I figured roads wouldn't be clear anyway. Might as well stay there. And back to the steaks. There's no reason for us to let those steaks go to waste. so if Ty's going to offer steaks for everybody to eat that was helping him, it would have been rude to turn that down.
Hey, there is nothing wrong with eating well in a disaster. You got to do something with the food. And, you know, given your results with HF Radio, I'm not surprised, because a huge number of the stations you would have normally reached were off the air. There were a lot of folks with antennas laying on the ground at that point. So, Forrest, what are your takes on tools and fuel and all that fun stuff? Because it seems like this whole disaster is characterized by 3 things: vehicles, chainsaws, and fuel.
It's interesting. Every prepper camp always happens in September, which is National Preparedness Month. And it's because hurricanes. And so every time we're at prepper camp, something major seems to happen in the world. If you remember, there was a tornado. They hit like the Gulf Coast and shut all the gas. And there was a gas shortage one year. And I think 2 times. Then a pipeline. They had to shut down the pipeline because of
ransomware. That was that
ransomware.
Yeah.
And then there was another. It's like every year during prepper camp, something happens anyway. So we are always, hey, you go to prepper camp, you always got to fill your car up, because there's like 2 gas stations around Saluda. And so since I was in Tryon, I went there. I tried to get into Saluda, couldn't get in. And so I drove home. And so if you can imagine, I got out of the neighborhood that I was in around 2:00 in the afternoon. They finally cleared it out, them lazy bums. It took them 5 hours to get me, I'm just kidding, to get me out of there. And I drove home because I couldn't even call my wife. No matter where I went, I could not get cell reception anywhere. And I didn't think about, the only thing I thought about using was the Meshtastic. And I didn't even know I hit the Mount Mitchell repeater with Meshtastic until I got home, and I looked and I saw on my log that I actually hit that. And I'm like, that would have been interesting. I still want to get an after action report of how that worked and if people were using that in the Asheville area. So I drove home, slept in a nice bed, and I could see everything that was going on. I saw everything that was just amazing. And I debated on even going back on Saturday. And I did, because we had so many people I know at prepper camp. I thought, I'm going to go up there, and at least I need to be with them. I need to be around. It will be fun. We maybe do some work, some cleanup. So I went back up there, and I took my chainsaw and some gas and some chains and some straps in case we need to pull cars out, all this stuff. So I'm sitting at Tryon again with the deputy and about 15 other preppers trying to get to Saluda. And the deputy said, yeah, you're not getting Saluda today. There's slides down this road, trees down this road, because you're not going to get there. So we stood out there and talked. So I literally woke up at 5:30, drove there because I wanted to be there early. And the deputy just stopped by. And so we stood there for about 3 hours and we talked. And again, no cell phone service or anything. And I turned around and came back home. But the tools here's the interesting thing that now I'm actually thinking about it. I had a ham radio I could hit the Mount Mitchell repeater. I had my bug out bag. I had all the tools with me, but I'm prepared for a real a real disaster or a real SHTF. And I didn't really know I was in one. And then what was my comms plan being in the middle of nowhere in Tryon and with people 6 miles away? And I really didn't even turn to any of my tools and try to contact anyone, try to get on the repeater. I just kind of gave up and went back to safety. I'm not saying, maybe I'm a wimp, I don't know, but I didn't even think about turning on my ham radio and trying to hit a repeater and get to people, or even I didn't have my HF radio with me, but I did have my 2 meter and 70 centimeter handheld, which I could have definitely hit Mount Mitchell from where I was, and didn't even think about it. I just hightailed it out of there.
So I think that that's a common thread that I've heard from a lot of people I've talked to in the first 24, even to 48 hours, depending on where they were, maybe even 72 in some cases. They knew they were in the aftermath of a hurricane. They knew they didn't have power. They knew they didn't have cell phones, but they really didn't know how bad of a disaster this was. They didn't know that this was a 100-year, 200-year, 500-year, whatever it was, event. They just knew that this was bad, and it probably hit worse where I'm at, because it can't possibly be worse anywhere else, right? Mm-hmm. So we saw that, and a lot of folks just kind of, if they had tools, it took them a few minutes to realize, oh yeah, this is actually what I've been preparing for. It's go time. Let's go. I know you guys have already talked a little bit about what the drive out on Sunday was like. I know you guys saw some stuff we probably don't want to talk about on the podcast. I know there was some crazy things, getting out of there. I know it was a mess, and fuel supplies were tight and that kind of thing. If you guys have something you want to add to that, please do. Also want to know, would you guys do it again? If you knew right now that it was going to be what it was like for that weekend, would you go do it again? Or would you go, you know what, I'm going to sit this one out and watch it on TV?
Well, to answer the last part of what you said, no, I would not do it again. It was by the grace of God, none of us were injured. And no, in hindsight, I would never put myself purposely in a dangerous situation like that. And the ride home, we definitely stuck together in 2 separate caravans and helped each other through that. We even had one guy who got home a little earlier and filled up a bunch of gas cans and was prepared to come all the way back down 85 to get gas to our one person who was struggling to get gas. But we stuck together. We helped each other through some downed power lines and things like that, and used our radios to just stay together in our 2 caravans. And Pete was in a different caravan from me.
Right. So as to the first part of your question there, would I go if I'd have known that that storm was going to go right over Saluda, North Carolina? No, I would not have gone. And I would have thought anybody that did was crazy. That being said, I knew there was going to be some weather. I just didn't know it was going to be that. Hindsight, maybe wish I would have brought my chainsaw, but I don't know. Another thing, we did the 2 caravans. I was in the first one, and ours was a smaller caravan. We were all ready to get out of there at that point. What we would do, we had our topo maps with us and some other paper maps. We also looked at the maps on our phones through the Starlink connection before we left. So we realized by that point how bad Western North Carolina was, and all the places that were in Western North Carolina where you'd have to drive through a road or drive maybe not even on the road you wanted to because it was washed out, that you would go into places where there'd be stoplights, especially Shelby, North Carolina, and it'd be a traffic jam because there's no traffic signals. you'd have a lot of people in Western North Carolina either wanting to leave or people who wanted to go home. So we decided the safest bet was to go into South Carolina, go through Spartanburg, and come up through Charlotte, which I think was the right decision. It kept us, for the most part, away from lights and stuff like that. We got, I think, 2 traffic jams. And anytime where we found a bad traffic spot, or we found a place that actually had electricity and was able to sell gasoline, one of our people, we'd be on the radios with each other, and one of our people would send a text back to somebody in the second caravan, and hopefully they'd hit a cell or something and get the text. And I don't know how many people in your caravan, if they mentioned it or not, but we were sending messages back to you guys in the front caravan. Saw a lot of bucket trucks headed down the road. Saw 3 of them had a chain reaction accident with each other and backed up traffic for miles in Spartanburg. And the bad thing was a lot of the traffic that was trapped behind them were also bucket trucks. Mm-hmm. So it delayed that accident. One accident probably delayed a lot. I know they had it in that county in South Carolina, they had over 90% power outage in that county. So we were lucky to see any gas stations with electricity. But yeah, we all pulled together. We all stuck together. If anybody felt like they were slighted or weren't helped, it was not an intentional thing. But we also tried to do our things. Got canceled for Friday because of what happened. And Saturday we went ahead and we did the classes and stuff, or at least for a truncated version of it. And we did have a mesh-tastic class. I took that, and that was the extent of prepper camp for me. A lot of the vendors weren't there. A few were. The ones that showed up managed to get there early. But we gave ham radio exams, and that was pretty awesome. And I don't know if that's going to be a regular thing now or not, but I know a lot of people criticized the fact that prepper camp took place with the storm coming. Nobody knew that was going to hit like that. Not there. Even if I'd have lost the money for the ticket, if I'd have known it was going to hit like that, I would not have gone.
I underestimated the storm, and I would never put myself in danger like that again. I literally feel like I was 4 feet from dying, and that it shook me up, but also it strengthened my faith as well. So I will say that the talking about tools and getting out is, I was at an Airbnb that I used my maps to get to, and then to get out, your maps didn't work. Maps, if you don't know, but maps like Apple or Google Maps do not work if they can't connect to the internet. And so I had to 15, 20 turns to get out of the neighborhood, to get out of the city. Once I got to the city, I was fine, but your maps did not work at all. And everyone knows my bug out location is in Miami, Florida. So I don't have maps for the Asheville region in my bug out bag because they're not needed. I'm not going to Asheville. I'm going, I-95 south to the beach. I'm just kidding. It's not really in Miami. But so I didn't have even paper maps for that area, which was kind of bothersome. And I do now. And then when I went up there the next day, I was smart enough, I guess, you can, with like Google Maps, you can download a region in Google Maps onto your phone so your maps will work and it doesn't need to connect to the internet. And I would suggest to everyone in your area, especially your home area, download that maps. And I can't tell you the steps, but you can go to YouTube and find it, and go ahead and download the area that you're in 99% of your life and have the maps on there just in case. And you're saying, well, just in case what? I know the roads. Well, what if you have to go pick up your daughter or your son and you don't know the roads where you're going? The maps downloaded on your device will help you. So I think that's a good, smart thing to do. I have that now. for the entire region of North Carolina and South Carolina. Actually, I downloaded another mapping software that I can download the entire 4 states around, which is I'm ready. I wasn't ready for that. But the paper maps, what an inconvenience of not having them. Because I literally went to each intersection and go, which way did when I came in here last night at 9:00, which way did I come? And I made probably 5 or 6 bad decisions and had to turn around because I'm like, oh, that doesn't look right. And I turn around because when you're following the map, you don't pay attention when you're following your GPS. But so I learned a lesson there as well. But I would never put myself in situations like this. But also, knowing now what happened will prepare me to help people in the future. I know what they need, what happened, and I don't want to get into the planning part, but logistics was a nightmare for me because I didn't want to do it. And it was like I don't know if I put myself in that position of people wanting to donate things, and because one of the hardest hit areas is my hometown. And so when I got back here on Sunday, I'm like, oh my gosh, I see the videos and the stories of a town called Spruce Pine, North Carolina. That's my people. That is where I grew up. And that's my friends. And I literally had one friend call my best friend here in Charlotte because we went to high school together. And this guy is not poor. He's not poor at all. I mean, he's top 5% in the county. He called my friend Tom and said, Tom, I need help. We have no power. Our food's gone. Half our house is washed away. We have nothing. Can you come and help? And when that call happens, you're like, what? And then you jump in the action, and we sent a truck and a trailer just for him. And he's somehow, Tom, I think it took Tom 7 hours to drive 2.5 hours once he got up there. But they got to him with everything he needed. And, when grown men cry and say, I need your help, it's a bad situation. And it was a very bad situation.
Forrest, you reminded me of something when you were talking about not having your paper map and everything. And I was a little bit suspicious of my Maps app with in and out cell towers and stuff. And I have satellite navigation on my truck. Got a little GPS system in my truck, which doesn't require a cell phone. It's just using GPS, but of course it doesn't know what traffic situations are. And so I had them both going at the same time. And surprisingly, they both track the same turn by turn and everything on the way back home. The only downside was you don't get traffic information on there. But yeah, having the paper maps is definitely a blessing. I've got a habit now. If I drive into a state, I'll stop by a welcome center and pick up a paper map and just throw it in the car. And, I've got all the pretty much the surrounding states around North Carolina. Hopefully I'll get some more. But I know if you've got AAA, you can order those things too. So that's always a good idea.
I have AAA. Thanks for reminding.
You're welcome.
Darn it.
I learned something new there too. Interesting, because I use OpenStreetMaps where you can download, the whole state. Use that for navigation offline, and also use an application called Avenza that allows you to download maps that are specific, a lot of times to parks, wilderness areas, off-road usage maps, motor vehicle usage maps, all kinds of things like that. And a lot of the SAR guys I know use that and drop pins and those sorts of things. So I kind of started using it with them. But there's a number of different offline mapping things. And if you're not familiar with that, having access to that, sometimes, around here, a lot of the places that were worst hit by this, on a good day, cell service was marginal. And now it's gone, and it's going to be gone for a while. So having access to that stuff stored on a tablet, on your phone, even if you don't have a paper map, is a great start, because your GPS, at least in this scenario, still works. So you can figure out where you're at and kind of navigate your way around. It's totally critical to have mapping and be able to find your way out, especially like you guys being somewhere that you've been to a lot of times, but you always probably go in the same way. You don't know the side roads. You don't know the things the local knows. And when those roads get damaged, flooded, whatever, you got to find another route. And that's something I look at on a map totally different now. When I see a map and I see a blue line go under a road, I now make note of it, because in this situation, a blue line going under a road quite possibly means that road doesn't exist anymore in a lot of areas. So one of those kind of things to pay careful attention to. And you guys, everybody said, if we had known what this was going to be like, we wouldn't have gone. I didn't really expect any other answers than that. Nobody had any idea what this was going to be like. I thought it was coming my way. I left for work that morning with a fairly large chainsaw in the truck and extra fuel and all kinds of stuff, prepared to do whatever I had to do battle with the storm at work that day. And you guys are completely in the dark, off grid, and I'm sitting around going, this is like misty rain. It was worse than this on Tuesday night. And it all went over to that side of the mountain and got stuck. So yeah, it's a totally different situation over there. And we didn't even hear where we saw a lot of the flooding. There wasn't even the kind of rain that you guys saw here. It was just all of it washing out of the mountains, out of all of the watersheds in western North Carolina. Watersheds I didn't know existed that flow into Tennessee. And all that water eventually ended up over here. Because I thought, the stuff in Asheville, doesn't that go like towards the ocean? No, it comes into Tennessee. So I don't know why I didn't make that connection, but all of it eventually ended up over here. So lots and lots and lots of lessons learned on that, lessons learned on logistics, transportation, communications. You guys got to see a lot of that firsthand. That is it for the first episode of the Prepping Academy podcast on Hurricane Helene. We will pick up with more from our guests in the next episode as we explore some of the relief efforts that we participated in, lessons learned, and other experiences with value. Thank you for listening to the Prepping Academy podcast. Stay frosty and prep on.